Right now, one of the most dramatic national collapses in modern history is unfolding just 90 miles from the coast of Florida, and most people have no idea it's even happening. Cuba, an island of 11 million people, is emptying out at a speed that has never been seen before in the 21st century. The economy is in free fall. The lights are going out. People are starving, and the regime that has held power for 67 straight years may finally be facing its last chapter. This is the full story of how Cuba got here, why it matters, and what happens next. Let's start with the numbers because they are genuinely shocking. At the start of 2020, Cuba had a population of approximately 11.2 million people. In just 5 years, an estimated 2.95 million Cubans have left the island. That means nearly 1 in every 2 Cubans has walked away from their home country in half a decade. That is the fastest rate of population collapse experienced by any nation in the 21st century. Faster than Syria during its civil war, faster than Venezuela during its own economic implosion. Even the Cuban government's own official data, which is almost certainly downplaying the real numbers, admits that 14% of the population has left since 2020. Their official figure puts the current population at around 9.7 million people, but leading Cuban demographer Juan Carlos Elzebu Campos estimates the real number is closer to 8.25 million. For context, the only country that has lost people faster this decade is Ukraine, a country being actively invaded by Russia. Cuba is not at war with anyone. Its people are simply leaving because staying has become unbearable. The core reason people are fleeing is the economy, or what's left of it. Since 2018, Cuba's economy has contracted by at least 15%, and that's according to the government's own figures. The real number is almost certainly worse. The Cuban peso has been destroyed. In 2019, $1 bought you 20 pesos on the informal market. By late 2025, that same dollar was buying 450 pesos. That implies an annualized inflation rate of roughly 68% every single year for 6 consecutive years. The kind of inflation that doesn't just hurt people, it wipes them out completely. The average official monthly wage in Cuba today is around 6,500 pesos. At the current informal exchange rate, that equals just $14 per month. And yet a single carton of 30 eggs costs 2,800 pesos, nearly half of someone's entire monthly salary. A kilogram of rice and a kilogram of beans, the most basic staple foods on the island, will cost the average Cuban worker 3 full days of labor. This is not poverty. This is an economic system that has completely failed the people living inside it. The human cost behind those numbers is staggering. The Cuban Observatory for Human Rights, an NGO based in Spain, estimates that 89% of the Cuban population now lives in extreme poverty. 7 out of 10 Cubans are skipping at least 1 meal per day. Only 3% of the population can actually find the medicine they need at pharmacies. Gasoline shortages are so severe that drivers wait weeks just to receive a rationed allocation of 40 liters of fuel, which then costs them the equivalent of $46, often several times their monthly wage. An estimated 78% of Cubans surveyed said they either wanted to leave the country themselves or knew someone who did. One of the most visible signs of Cuba's collapse is the electricity crisis. Nationwide blackouts have become routine. In 2025 alone, Cuba experienced at least 5 nationwide outages. Most of the island loses power for at least 4 hours daily during summer heat, while rural provinces can go up to 20 hours without electricity. No air conditioning, no refrigeration, nothing. Cuba is generating 25% less electricity than it did in 2019, largely because 83% of its power comes from burning oil in outdated Soviet-era generators, and 60% of that oil has to be imported. Now, following the U.S. military operation that removed Maduro from power, even that final trickle is under direct threat. To understand why Cuba is in this position, you need a little history. Before the revolution, Cuba was ruled by Fulgencio Batista, a US-backed dictator who tortured opponents, handed the country's resources to foreign corporations, and was openly bribed by American businesses. By the end of his rule, 70% of Cuba's arable land was owned by foreigners. When Castro's revolution succeeded in 1959, the US immediately began plotting to remove him. The CIA-backed Bays of Pigs invasion in 1961 was a catastrophic failure that only pushed Cuba into the Soviet Union's arms and made Castro a symbol of resistance against American imperialism. What makes Cuba uniquely fascinating is that there are now essentially two Cubas in the world: the Cuba on the island and the Cuba in South Florida. Over generations of migration, around 2 million of Cuban ancestry now live in the Miami metropolitan area, nearly the same size as Havana's entire population. Miami's GDP alone is double the GDP of the entire island. It is no coincidence that Marco Rubio, son of Cuban exiles and now America's Secretary of State, is the primary architect of current U.S. policy toward Cuba. Despite everything, the Cuban Communist Party has defied collapse predictions for decades. Unlike Eastern European regimes imposed by Soviet occupation, Cuba's revolution was a genuine homegrown uprising, giving it domestic legitimacy that kept it alive through the Soviet collapse, Fidel's death, and multiple leadership transitions. Raúl Castro, now 95, still pulls strings behind the scenes, but his time is running out, and a succession crisis within the party is looming. The Trump administration is applying maximum pressure, cutting oil supplies, maintaining the embargo, keeping Cuba on the terrorism list. But Washington fears pushing too hard and triggering a Haiti-style collapse that would flood the U.S. border with migrants. History says never count Cuba out, but the island is running out of people, fuel, and time. Cuba has been called the last relic of the Cold War, but what is happening there right now, the empty highways, the darkened cities, and the millions of people who have simply walked away. The story of Cuba in 2025 and 2026 is one of the most consequential stories in the world right now, and it deserves your attention. If you found this video valuable, drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, because this story is far from over.